Okay. Page Lamed, Amud Beis 30b. So yesterday we left ourselves off where we had a statement from Rabin Bar Chanina, who said in the name of Ula, who said in the name of Chanina. Bottom line is Chanina. Now we have a statement from Rab Chanina by tradition, quote, the halacha follows Rab Shimon Shazuri, and moreover, any time Rab Shimon Shazuri is mentioned, the halacha follows him. And we were trying to identify what scenario was Rab Chanina talking about when he said that the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri. Now the reason why this is a difficulty is because you can't just pull out any statement from Rab Shimon Shazuri throughout the Talmud. The reason why there's difficulty is because of the nature of tradition. And we're taught by our sages to remember and to commit to memory certain statements. So whenever there's a statement from a Mishnah, and we already have somebody else who says the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri, right? Then that's already been a stated fact, and Rab Chanina wouldn't come to tell us, remember the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri. So when Rab Chanina comes and says the halacha is Shimon Shazuri, he must be speaking about some scenario about which nobody else said the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri. Because if someone else already said it, there's no reason for him to say it and make you commit it to memory. Right? So if you've already committed to memory that Rabbi Yochanan said the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri, no reason for Rab Chanina to come and say it. So we have to go throughout Shas, we have to go throughout the Gemara and try to find a scenario where Rab Shimon Shazuri speaks and nobody else already told us that the halacha follows one way or the other. And by way of doing so, we're going to be introduced to a number of halachas that aren't really related to the subject of writing Torah, which is our primary subject here, but it's going to be, so we're going to get a little flavor for different halachas throughout the Gemara.
Eventually the one you find has to relate to this topic.
Not necessarily.
No.
Not necessarily. It came up because we had a statement for Reb Shimon Shazuri in our topic. We've already said that it can't be Reb Chanina speaking about our topic because we had another set of people who spoke about the halacha with respect to our topic. Right? Okay. So we are... It's almost the middle of the page. The line starts the words V'im Isa, and then it's a little bit below halfway. The line starts the word V'im Isa, and then V'im Isa hu nami lema Ella, and that's the word we are, Ella. Start to last word on that line. Ella, yeah, that's it. Ella, rather, aha, on this. This is the following statement is where we might apply the statement of Rab Chanina that the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri. So what's the statement? There's a halacha like this. It's called the halacha of a ben Bekuah. It's the halacha. And it means as follows. Of course there's the law, there's a Torah law, that one may not eat beef, even of a kosher animal.
Women?
One may not eat. One may not eat beef, even if it's from a kosher animal, if it hasn't been ritually slaughtered following the proper guidelines of shechita.
If it wasn't ritually slaughtered, it's
not kosher. But even if in other words, it's a cow, so it's beef. It's not bacon. So the beef itself, the ingredients are kosher, but hasn't been prepared in the proper way. Right? When people say the word kosher means appropriate or fit, meaning to say this food is appropriate or fit by halachic standards. That's what the word kosher means. But to get to that point, there are a bunch of mitzvahs that come together. Right? One of them is which animal you're using. That's the first element of kosher. Is it bacon or is it beef or poultry? Another element is it mixed with cheese? Another element is has it been prepared properly? They're each separate mitzvahs all coming together to make kosher. So I mean here is that even if the animal is kosher, beef, it's less be prepared. It's a separate mitzvah, shechita. Now the halacha is that they benefit. You could benefit actually from non-slaughtered animals. You can't benefit from milk and meat, but you could benefit from animals that have been slaughtered properly. You can sell it to a non-Jew. You can feed it to your dog, whatever. Which is what companies do. If you're a kosher slaughterhouse and you're slaughtering hundreds of animals, and 20 of them become not kosher, you could lose a lot of money if you can't benefit from that. So they sell it to their non-Jewish neighbor. not a problem. At any rate, the halacha here is about a ben bekuah is like this. The halacha is that a cow that has been slaughtered, or any animal, female, and was pregnant at the time of the ritual slaughtering. So the halacha is that the act of slaughtering that you did to the mother applies to the fetus in the womb. When it comes to human beings, the fetus has its own rights, if you will, as an independent being to some degree, to most degree. But when it comes to an animal, it doesn't get that. A pregnant animal, at least when it comes to the laws of shechita, the calf that's in the womb, the fetus, is considered an extension of the mother, and therefore is kosher to eat without ritually slaughtering it. So usually, I don't know if you would know that the mother is pregnant at all, but if you slaughtered a cow, and then it turns out that it was pregnant, usually the fetus doesn't survive anyway. Right? But there is a scenario, if it's late in the pregnancy, the fetus could survive after the mother's already been killed. In which case, you have this unique anomaly, you have this halachic anomaly, where you have a living being, a living cow, it's a calf, that does not need ritual slaughter to be eaten. So it's already received slaughtering from its mother, even though it's technically walking around and alive. This is the halacha of ben bekuah.
But you still slaughter it just to show other people that you're actually slaughtering, because some people would
What they do in practice, probably, I don't know, I'm not familiar. I should ask my father-in-law. That's what he does for a living. He's a shochet. He's a ritual slaughterer in Australia. I should ask him. But the truth is, actually, I once saw ben bekuah. I spent the summer in Uruguay, South America, and they have a lot of the meat that the kosher meat in Israel is brought in from Argentina and Uruguay from South America. So when I was there, they took us to a visit. We learned the laws of shechita then, just as part of our summer learning, and then we went to, I didn't practice, but I just learned the technical laws, and then I went to the Simla Chadasha, as it's called, the book, Simla Chadasha, and we went to observe how ritual slaughtering is done. And it happened to be when we were there was a fetus, but it didn't survive the death of its mother, so it didn't follow this law that's specifically here. So Rav Shimon Shizuri says like this. Rav Shimon Shizuri says, Afilu ben chamesh shanim, even if this fetus survived the death of its mother and made it to 5 years old, so it's a full living cow at this point. And it's a healthy cow that's plowing the field. So it's been years ago when its mother was killed at its birth. So says Rav Shimon Shizuri, Shchitnas imim matarasei, the fact that its mother was ritually slaughtered deems this animal kosher, and it doesn't require ritual slaughtering, even though it's survived all this time and it's seemingly an independent animal. Says Rav Shimon Shizuri, the fact that its mother was ritually slaughtered and therefore properly prepared in a kosher fashion, while it was still in its mother's womb, it now does not require ritual slaughtering, even 5 years later. That's how far Rav Shimon Shizuri is extending the law of ben bekuah.
What about the child of that cow?
The child of that cow?
Yeah.
Good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it should extend all the way down to there.
Yeah.
The point was, this was a piece of meat, so to speak, at the time of the slaughtering. The one that's a fetus that develops later, I don't think would be extension of that, but I don't think so.
Would you eat it?
God willing, I will. Would I eat it? Sure. I wouldn't even know. It would end up in a packaging in the store. I wouldn't even know. It's just kosher on it. So the truth is, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to ask my father-in-law specifically. I'll try to remember. He's in Australia, so I can't ask him now, but I'll try after Shabbos to ask him, and I'll let you know what he says.
And so you can just cut off his head anyway, and he's going to be good to eat?
Yep.
Okay.
It's a halachic anomaly called the ben bekuah. So says the Gemara, perhaps when Rabbi Chanina said that the halacha follows Rav Shimon Shizuri, he's speaking about this law. Because here we have a statement from Rav Shimon Shizuri with respect to extending this anomaly of the ben bekuah, the fetus that was there at the time of its mother's ritual slaughtering. Says the Gemara, this can't be what Chanina means. Why? Because ha'it ma'ala, we've already been told about this statement, Ze'iri Omar Rav Chanina, that Ze'iri said in the name of Chanina, halacha Rav Shimon Shizuri, the halacha follows Shimon Shizuri. So we have Rav Chanina already said it, that the halacha follows Rav Shimon Shizuri here. And Ze'iri brought us that tradition. Whereas here we have Rabin Bar, who is it? Rabin Bar Abba speaking in the name of Ullah that Chanina said. Sorry, Rabin Bar Chanina, Amar Ullah, Amar Rab Chanina. So we already have somebody, but whereas over here, with respect to this anomaly of the Bekuah, Ze'iri is bringing us a tradition from Rab Chanina. So we already know from Rab Chanina that the halacha follows Rab Shimon Shazuri in this case. So when Rabin Bar Abba tells us the halacha follows Rab Shimon Shazuri in the name of Chanina, it must be some other case. Because it's a separate time that Chanina said the halacha follows Rab Shimon Shazuri. So it must be somewhere else. And therefore, V'im Isa, if this is the case, that Rabin Bar Chanina, the name of Allah was speaking, Hanami Lema, it would also be recorded here. In other words, it would be recorded together. That Ze'iri and Allah said in the name of Chanina that Allah follows Shimon Shazuri. By the fact that we have two different traditions in the name of Chanina means that's a different case. So let's go through some more sections of the Gemara and find another halachic scenario where Shimon Shazuri speaks, and perhaps we'll apply the statement of Chanina to that. Alright? Okay, so the next scenario.
We're going through all of these exercises because we want to go back to that. Is it the leniency in the Torah scroll?
No. Because we've mentioned Shimon Shazuri there, and we raised the fact that Chanina said the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri, so we're trying to justify the statement from Chanina. We're trying to find the application for the statement of Chanina that the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri. Nothing to do with we've departed from the laws of Torah.
All to support that.
No, that's a closed deal. We had two different opinions as to what the halacha is,
Right.
and we're settled with that.
Right.
Now we're trying to find an application for the statement from Chanina, unrelated, a little departure from the halachas of the laws of
But
the
in terms
Sifter.
of halacha, it's true. Rabbi Shazur is right. We only put the whole Hashem there.
That's right. So we already have that halacha settled.
But not in the language of the Gemara. That's the problem.
That's right.
In
We're
the
trying
Gemara,
to-
we have to find a case where he's uniquely.
We're trying to apply and justify the unique language of Chanina is telling us to memorize the halacha of Shimon
It's a
Shazuri.
separate
It's a
analysis.
Exactly.
so this entire discussion can be put in brackets, square brackets.
Okay.
Yeah.
The whole discussion we put in
Square
square brackets. Yes, correct.
The halacha we hold by him. We're trying to find out that extra statement.
Okay.
That's correct. We're justifying the statement now. This is not.
His actually Shimon is a kind of a stringency because he says you can't put part of Hashem.
He's a
in my
stringency,
mind,
yeah.
Only the whole Hashem.
Right.
He's qualifying what Rabbi Huda said.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're departing from that at the moment.
Now
We're departing from that.
Yes.
completely
So now we're in a square brackets, if you will. That's a good way of putting it.
Lost.
It's a
Yeah.
tangent.
So we're going from one case to another. Okay, so now we've closed the case on the Ben Bekuah. This halachic anomaly of a fetus that was there at the time of its mother slaughtering. Close that case. We know the halacha. The halacha is it doesn't need slaughtering even 5 years later, even though it's a healthy animal.
Only if it's living, eh?
No, even if
Comes
it's
out alive.
even if it comes out alive, certainly. No, sorry. If it doesn't make it, and it comes out not alive, then it's a piece of meat like any other. So for sure you can eat it, right? But over here it's saying even if it survives, you still don't need to ritual slaughter. You don't need to do any ritual slaughtering because it already got the ritual slaughtering from its mother.
I thought we weren't allowed to eat from a dead animal.
What do you mean? This is the anomaly, because it got. This is exactly the anomaly,
Slaughtered.
because it's slaughtering.
It's deemed slaughtered.
That's right. It's deemed slaughtered by the very fact that its mother was slaughtered while it was there, even though now it's technically alive. This is the halachic anomaly. It's an interesting departure from what you would think, right? So we're closing the case on that. Now we're trying to find a new case, a new scenario, a new set of halachas, which we can apply to Rab Chanina's statement that the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri. Clear? So let's introduce this new case. Ella, rather, it's on the following statement. And that is as follows. But Rishono originally, they used to say, Hayotze b'koiler, one who's being carried by a koiler is a noose, like a noose around the neck. That is to say, that if someone has been sentenced by Jewish court or even not a Jewish court, he was sentenced to death. Okay, so now the halacha is that there are people who might want to divorce their wives before they pass, rather than have their wives be widows. There are different halachic reasons why a person would want to do that.
Especially for Yibum.
The primary reason is that if there's halacha of Yibum, if the law is if a fellow passes away without any children, right? So his brother, the brother of the deceased, ought to marry his widowed sister-in-law. And the point is to keep the family line because she didn't have any children from her first husband. So it's and the way to get out of it is through chalitza. There's a whole process of a special kind of divorce that they have to go through, and it's not a very pleasant exercise. It's rare, and it's not very pleasant. So a person might want to avoid his wife going through that. So he knows he's going to die because he's on his way to the scaffold. Right? He's been sentenced to death by the court, and he knows he doesn't have any children, and he doesn't want his brother and his wife to have to go through this whole process. So he's going to divorce his wife just before his death. But he's being dragged by the state police to the scaffold. He doesn't have time to sit down and hire a scribe to write a get and all the rest of it. So what does he do? The Amar, he calls out, Kisfu get leishti, write a divorce note for my wife. That's what he screams out. So he essentially makes whoever's listening, let's say it's his court or his family, whoever's there, he makes them an agent to give his wife a divorce. Now, making an agent to give one's wife a divorce is okay. It's allowed. I actually once served as an agent. I was in Australia when I was a Chabad shliach in Australia. I was married. I was there just like kind of working in the yeshiva, and we were learning the tractate Gittin, the laws of divorce, and right at the beginning it talks about agency. So the local court knew that we were learning the laws. They wanted us to experience it. So during one divorce, we sat in to watch the proceedings, and for some reason the husband and wife did not want to see each other. So first the husband came in, instructed the court to make the divorce papers, and then he gave me the paper instructing me to deliver it to his wife. He left and went home. Half hour later the wife came in. They didn't want to see each other, I guess, and I told her, your husband instructed me to hand you this. I watched it being written, I watched it being signed, and I said all the things that I have to say, and I gave it to her. So this fellow who's about to die, he wants to prevent his brother and his soon-to-be widowed wife from going through the whole process of chalitza, going through the whole process of this yibum problem, because otherwise they have this thing. So he wants to divorce his wife so she's free to marry anybody without any trouble. But he doesn't have time to go to a court and hire someone to write. So he yells out and says, write a divorce for my wife. Now the law is that, it's a long discussion in the Gemara and Masechta Gittin, but the law is that the husband is required not just to make an agency to write the divorce, but he has to make agency that the divorce is delivered. So he ought to say, write and deliver the divorce paper. But he didn't say that. Because he's in a state, he's about to get hung.
State of shock, yeah.
He's about to get hung, or whatever his sentence is. So he says, write a divorce paper. So ordinarily, under ordinary circumstances, we wouldn't validate that statement, that agency. We would tell him, do you want the agent to deliver it? And only if he makes the agent an agency of delivery, not just an agency of writing the actual paper, then the divorce is valid. Until then, the divorce is not valid.
But if someone delivers it,
then it's invalid because he never made anybody an agent.
Never gave an agent.
That's right. He never appointed an agent to deliver it in front of witnesses. A whole thing he has to do.
But this is a situation of distress.
So says the halacha. But initially they used to say, one who's about to go to be sentenced to death by the court, and he said, Kisvu get leishti, write a divorce paper for my wife, without explicitly stating, please deliver it. They should write it v'yitnu, and give it, because it's clear that his intention is it should be delivered. Mm-hmm. He just is in a state and doesn't know, so he just said it like that. But it's kind of clear because of his situation that he means to have it delivered, and therefore we validate it.
So it's implied, not.
It's implied that he means to deliver.
Implicit.
That's correct. It's implicit in in the scenario.
In that particular context.
Yeah.
Because in other cases, a person can say, write a get for my wife. I just want to threaten his wife, so he has to get ready. But actually
and then when he's ready to give it, he'll give it.
Exactly.
So it doesn't necessarily mean, that's right. Ordinarily, it could mean he wants to divide it up.
Yeah.
Have it in his back pocket, and when it's ready to go, he'll give it to her.
He's not going to be around though.
But so obviously, because of the extraneous, because of the extraneous circumstances, we infer or we interpret from the fact that he said, "Please write the divorce paper for my wife," that he means to deliver it also.
Yeah.
Now the Gemara expands it and says, "So that originally they said that this extraneous sort of statement is only when someone is being sentenced to death by the court, by the government, whatever it is.
Not if she's dying.
So Chazar Leimar,
Two more cases.
later they added and said there are other extraneous circumstances where the same law applies. Namely, Afa Mefaresh, likewise one who travels by sea, Vayotze b'shayara, and one who travels through the desert in a with a caravan. That's what Yotze b'shayara means. He goes out in a caravan, meaning he's traveling in the desert. Now, today we have airplanes and communication and things. It's very easy to know where somebody is around the world. But back in the day, if you were a merchant, and so it was very common that you would spend 6 months at home, and then 6 months of the year you would be gone, and your wife essentially and family had no idea if you were going to come back or when you were going to come back. So it wasn't uncommon that people would write divorce papers before they went on these long travels, and they would say there was a whole thing that they would do that if I don't come back by X date, this divorce becomes valid. So that way, she doesn't become an almana, a guna, meaning someone who we can't identify if the husband's alive or dead. So she can't remarry because maybe her husband's alive. So she's stuck. Right. So if this guy goes on a business trip and his ship sinks 3 days in, who's supposed to know that the ship sank? Nobody. And this woman is never stuck, can't get remarried. So what would they do? They would give a divorce paper, and they would say by X date, if I don't come back, the divorce is valid. Now she can get remarried. There's all kinds of scenarios that has been happened throughout our history where people gave these divorce papers and said by X date, if I don't come back, the divorce should take effect. The guy didn't come back, the divorce took effect, she got remarried, and then the husband shows up. He just came back late. Whatever
in the war.
During the war. Yeah, it happened in prison wars. It happens.
How did she prove delivery of the papers?
So these things usually happen in front of witnesses. There's a whole process.
They had
Yeah.
witnesses.
Yeah. So now the Gemara says like this. So initially they used to make this leniency, where if he didn't say explicitly, please deliver it to her, he just said write it. That leniency was reserved for one who is being sentenced to death by the court. Later they added even someone who's going on a dangerous journey, him too, because if it turns out he says write a divorce paper for my wife, and then says, write a divorce paper that's dated in 6 months from now, and then he disappears. He never said the word please deliver it to her. 6 months arrives. It's very obvious that he meant deliver it to her. So we expanded this leniency for that scenario too. For the guys traveling by sea or by desert, which are both dangerous, long-term
or
traveling.
I could just
Doesn't mention war, because war actually, it's already a law that you have to do it. The law by war is these cases you don't have to do this. It's something that the husband's electing to do to save his wife from trouble later on. When it comes to war, actually, you're required by law to do that.
It's a mitzvah.
That's correct.
I could just
But
see
anyway.
me doing that to my wife. He wants to divorce me and he wants me to pay for the funeral.
So where does Rav Shimon Shazari come in? So Rav Shimon Shazari says, we're going to expand this leniency. Apa mesukan, likewise someone who's dangerously ill. Who says, write a divorce paper for my wife. Doesn't say specifically deliver it. And he goes into a coma. I'm just giving that scenario, let's just say, because we can't communicate with him now. He could be in the coma for who knows how many years. And Nebach, this woman, she can't get remarried, she's stuck. So we will say, so Rav Shimon Shazari says, that leniency that you've given to the guy who's sentenced to death, and you given to the guy who traveled, we didn't explicitly state deliver it, all he said was write it, let's expand that for this fellow too, and let her have a divorce and let her get remarried. So says the Gemara, perhaps when Rav Chanina said that the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri, it's talking about this scenario. Perhaps this is the one he's talking about. The Gemara doesn't discount it just yet. The Gemara introduces another one. Do we have time for another one? Okay, one more. Says the Gemara, Inami, perhaps, maybe it's another case. There's another scenario where Rav Shimon Shazuri speaks, and perhaps Rav Chanina means that circumstance. That the halacha follows Shimon Shazuri in the next circumstance. And now we're in case number 3. The first one was the halachik anomaly of the shchita, the fetus, the ben Bekuah, the fetus who survived its mother's ritual slaughtering. Case number 2 is the guy who's dangerously ill and says write the divorce, but doesn't explicitly state deliver a divorce. And now it's scenario number 3, and that is as follows: Trumas meiser shadmai, someone who buys We won't get into all the details of this halacha, but we'll stick to the basic. Someone who buys produce from someone about whom we aren't sure if he gave the requisite tithe. We're not sure. Now, the assumption is that most people do give their tithe. That's the assumption. However, if you're not 100% sure, it gets this halacha called demai. Demai means that the person buying the produce will give the tithe just in case the other guy didn't. But there are scenarios in which we are lenient and allow you to eat that food even though the tithe hasn't been given, or this tithe of a doubt hasn't been given, because it's only a doubt, because we're 90% sure the guy gave it, we're just not 100% sure. Clear? Right? Because until the tithe has been given, you can't eat from the food. So here, we're not sure if the tithe was given. So can you eat or can't you eat? So generally speaking, we say don't eat. But there are circumstances under which we say we let you eat. Certain circumstances. Now, says the Gemara, there's a certain like this. This food that I bought, this produce that I bought from someone who I'm not sure if it gave the requisite tithe, got mixed in to other food that I am sure I gave the tithe. So I have one set of produce that I know I gave tithe, because it's mine. Then I bought produce from somebody else, and I'm not sure if that guy gave the tithe. Now these two piles of produce got mixed up together. What do I do now? Half of it I'm allowed to eat, half of it's in doubt if I'm allowed to eat it.
Then you're allowed.
So generally speaking, the halacha is, if it's Shabbos, right, where I cannot take tithe, I'm not allowed to take tithe on Shabbos, so what do? During the week, I can take tithe in doubt. There's a whole process of way of taking tithe in doubt. But on Shabbos, I can't take that tithe. So what do? So usually the halacha is, I go to the guy who I bought it from and I ask him, did you give tithe? And if he says yes, I take his word for it. Even though I'm not 100% sure if he's saying the truth or not, but because to begin with, most people take their tithe, I'll take his word for it. Even though I don't necessarily know if I can trust him. But because it's mixed into other things, and it's Shabbos, so it's like a bunch of doubts. Perhaps he gave tithe to begin with. Number two, it's mixed into things that are kosher, so maybe when I take food, the food I'm eating is actually kosher. And finally, it's Shabbos, where I'm prevented from taking tithe to begin with. So we're lenient and we say, ask the guy you bought it from, did you give tithe? If he says yes, eat. Rabbi Shimon Shizori says, Af b'chol, even during the weekday, when it's not Shabbos, because to begin with, we're not even sure perhaps he even gave a tithe. And it's been mixed into other kosher food. So at this point we say, you know what? Forget it. Ask him if he gave a tithe. If he says yes, and you eat it, on his word. Take his word for it. So Rabbi Shimon Shizori says, you don't have to wait for Shabbos only when you can't tithe. Because it's almost far-fetched that there isn't tithe, that what you're eating is a problem. Because to begin with, he probably gave his tithe, number one. Number two, it's mixed into food you know for sure are kosher. So you know what? Ask him. If he says he gave tithe, trust him and eat and enjoy.
If you can't
Rabbi Shimon Shizori is being lenient here. Sorry?
If you can't ask him?
If you can't ask him, then you have to take a doubt tithe.
Oh, you have to.
There's a doubt tithe you take, which we're not going to get into at the moment, but there's a doubt tithe. Okay. So now this is the second scenario, or third scenario, that perhaps Rabbi Shimon about this, Rabbi Chanina says, the halacha follows Shimon Shizori. So we're talking about two cases right now. The Ben Bekuah, right? The first case of the
fetus.
The case of the Ben Bekuah, the case of the fetus that survived his mother's ritual slaughtering. We already have a statement from somebody else that the halacha follows Shimon Shizori, so we can't be talking about that. Now we're looking at two other scenarios. Number one, the guy who, under extraneous circumstances, said write a divorce and doesn't say give it. Number one. Number two, the case of the person who buys tithe from somebody from whom I'm not sure if he gave tithe, which is known as demai. And then this demai got mixed into kosher food, where Rabbi Shimon Shizori said I can take his word for it under that circumstance. This is the second scenario. Perhaps Rabbi Chanina says of this that the halacha follows Shimon Shizori. Says the Gemara, this cannot be the case of Rabbi Chanina. Why? Because we've already been told about these two cases. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, halacha Rabbi Shimon Shizori, the halacha follows Shimon Shizori, b'misukan, with respect to the guy who's dangerously ill and says write a divorce and doesn't say give it, ubetrumas ma'isa shod mai, and with respect to the law of produce that I'm not sure if tithe was taken, that got mixed up. So I already have a statement from Rabbi Yochanan that halacha follows Shimon Shizori in these circumstances. And therefore, this cannot be the circumstance under which Rabbi Chanina says that Allah follows Shimon Shazuri. Because V'im Isa, if this is indeed what Rabbi Chanina meant, Hu Nami Lema, it should have been said here as well. It should have said, Rabbi Yochanan and Chanina say that Allah follows Shimon Shazuri. So now we have to find another circumstance where Rabbi Shimon Shazuri is speaking, and Rabbi Chanina and then we will apply Rabbi Chanina's statement that Allah follows Shimon Shazuri to that other scenario. So we're still scouring throughout the entire Talmud to find some case where Shimon Shazuri speaks, and nobody has already qualified whether the halacha is like him or not. And we'll be introduced, God willing, after Shabbos to one more case, and then another 2 cases, and we're kind of getting a flavor for various different halachas throughout the Gemara. Have a good day and a good Shabbos, everybody.
Okay,